1949, a 30-year-old physicist convinced his 31-year-old classical dancer wife that there was much more to the performing arts for a nascently independent India than just artistry. Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, a pioneer of India's space and atomic programs, told Mrinalini Sarabhai, a highly gifted, respected classical dancer and choreographer, about the potential of the arts to engender a socio-cultural transformation in a country emerging from centuries of subjugation. The result was Darpana Academy of Performing Arts, which was set up on the banks of the Sabarmati River, not too far from Mohandas Gandhi's ashram. As the Academy celebrates the 75th anniversary of its founding, Dr. Mallika Sarabhai, daughter of the Sarabhais and herself a highly respected classical dancer, choreographer, actress, writer, and social activist, carries on the glorious tradition. The Academy has over the decades trained over 35,000 students from across India and the world in its quest to create well rounded, well informed, and independent individuals. Mallika Sarabhai spoke to MCR from Ahmedabad. Welcome to Mayank Reports, Mallika. It's always a great pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It's always lovely talking to you.
Congratulations on the 75th year of Darpana. It's quite extraordinary.
I think it's particularly extraordinary because if you look at arts institutions across the country, certainly, but I'm sure more than the country, by the time they turn about 40 or 50, they start archiving and writing their own obituary.
Right.
And for me, what is exciting is that we are producing newer and newer things, constantly changing with the technology changes. And I think that's exciting. I think the fact that we are 75 but carry our weight and our age very lightly, but still with a great legacy.
Indeed, indeed. Speaking of that, Mrinalini Ben and Vikram Bhai, your distinguished parents, were 31 and 30 respectively when they founded Darpana in 1949. That
Right.
means they lived not just their formative years between it, but even I think a significant part of their lives before India's independence. How do you think that shaped their philosophy as it relates to Darpana and art as a tool for socio-cultural transformation?
I think that particular vision came as Amma started seeing society. I don't think it started with that purpose. I think it started with the purpose that both of them valued the arts and found that large tracts of India knew nothing about the classical arts. And Papa felt very strongly that if you wanted to build an audience in an otherwise alien region, you needed to break in through the children. And then the children would be your first converts, if you like. Right. And then their parents, and then larger society. So he was the one who insisted that Darpana was started. Amma was, I think, quite happy having her own group of dancers and performing and not teaching at all. But it was Papa who persuaded her that unless she taught, she would not build an audience in Gujarat and North India.
You know, it's a remarkable segue for me because I had a question related to that. I found it quite striking that a physicist, and that too a distinguished one is that, took to the idea of the arts as a tool for socio-cultural transformation. Tell me a bit about that, because I'm sure you would have discussed those things with him.
Well, you know, I think Papa loved the arts. He was brought up in a family where all of them learned music, all of them learned dance. I have a wonderful photograph of Papa and Ahmedabad's first mayor, Chinubhai Chimanbhai, at a fancy dress party with Papa dressed as a samurai and Chinubhai Chimanbhai dressed as a clown. So obviously the arts and things of communication were not alien as they are perhaps today. You know, when we are so buried in our silos that perhaps we don't look around enough to see the connections. We see the differences more than the connections. And I think I have always had memories of Papa walking into his room with him listening to classical Western music. And my love for Western classical music comes from Papa's love for it. And Papa, when we were children, whistling Bridge on the River Kwai and teaching Kartike and me to march around our Kashmiri carpet. And
Really?
he was always filled with music. He was either whistling or he was humming or he was singing. And I think Amma captured his imagination about dance. Um, and then it sort of coalesced into the fact that he thought all the arts were important and humanized people, that his foray into physics and atomic particles and cosmic ray physics was not so different from the concept of Shiva as the cosmic force, which is
Absolutely.
why our home is called Chidambaram, Chit Ambaram, where the heart roams free, where the soul roams free, both scientific and philosophical.
Indeed.
And I
Indeed.
thought that when Amma started doing her experiments using dance to talk about things like dowry issues or hatred against Dalits, uh, I think Papa felt it was very right that a thinking artist should be reflecting back to society. And for him, for instance, uh, the insistent on bringing television to India so that every last village could leapfrog into an educated, aware space rather than wait for teachers to percolate down into the villages, which they still haven't done. Uh,
Right.
I think was very much looking at everything through the eye of it being a communicative medium to better lives. And I think that is really where their sort of paths intersected.
Right. Darpana's mission became sharper when Mrinalini first came to know about young girls in Saurashtra jumping into wells, some of them with their newborns, because they were under constant harassment for dowry from their in laws. Tell me a bit about that, because that's perhaps the defining moment for Darpana.
I think so too. I think so too. Amma was learning Gujarati while we were children. And Jayanti Dalal, the famous writer, and Umashankar Joshi, the famous poet, both of whom spoke very good English, and therefore Amma could relate to them. Most people in Ahmedabad didn't speak good English, and Amma had no Gujarati. And both of them suggested that she learn Gujarati not from the kakka barakhadis that we normally teach children through, but that she reads the newspaper. And they found her a teacher who would come and teach her through the newspapers. And she was very puzzled by these constant reports of Saurashtra women jumping into the well and pouring kerosene over themselves as well. And she discussed it with Jayanti Dalal and V.K. Mazumdar, who was also an English literature person, and Uma Shankar Pai, and they told her about dowries. And in spite of the fact that we later came to hear about the Salem girl children deaths to avoid dowry in Tamil Nadu, at that time she had never heard of dowries. And she was so horrified that she started researching into it and used Bharatanatyam, the language of Shringara, for the first time to talk about hatred and violence. And she was very, very astute in the fact that she felt that a lot of non-Tamil speaking or non-Telugu speaking people rejected Bharatanatyam because they said, we don't understand the language. So she did away with language and she took the bowl, the shoulders as we call it, of the rhythm which we repeat in Kathak and Bharatanatyam as onomatopoeic words like tadinginatom, takatadinginatom, takatiku tadinginatom.
Right.
Meaning it's like gibberish in that sense. And she imbued them with emotion, which they had never been. So that whether you spoke any language or not, if I said, the audience immediately understands the emotion of what is going on, the mockery, the violence, the hatred, the pathos. Uh, and it was a major breakthrough in the world of Indian dance,
You
both
know,
content wise and the use of symbols, spoken symbols as a language. And I
You
have
know,
built on it.
that perhaps explains why Prime Minister Nehru, when he saw one of the performances uh, uh, put up by Mrinalini, that he ordered a white paper on dowry debts.
That's right.
Uh, I would be interested to know what really happened.
Well, he was at Panditji and my grandmother, Ammaji, my maternal grandmother, had worked together. She was in the Constituent Assembly. She was a member of parliament. And so Panditji knew Amma as a child who was growing up. And Sarojini Naidu and family were also very close to Ammaji and Amma and so on. So whenever Amma would dance in Delhi, whenever he could, he would just unobtrusively slip in and slip out. And he would normally leave at the interval. And Amma always had a very classical first half and all her experimental work in the second half. So when
I see.
somebody came and told her that Panditji was in the audience, she wrote a note saying, please don't go in the interval today. And so he stayed and he saw Memories, a Fragment of Eternity, and came back saying, what are you talking about? And Amma told him. And that is when he said that this is a tragedy and we must find out about it. Which is when the whole term dowry death got defined as a term, and the whole tragedy got defined as something that was happening widespread in the country.
And it is ironic that those very social ills that prompted your parents to set up Darpana 75 years ago have
Are
not
still
really been
prevalent today.
eliminated. Sorry?
Are still prevalent today.
Exactly. So, if anything, in some sense, they've become even worse in some
Worse,
areas.
because technology
How do you look
aided.
at that? Yeah.
You know, I often say of people who work with me here in Darpana that we have them for 8 or 10 hours of the day. And we try and teach them the light rather than constant darkness that our politicians and the people who control our religions and the people who control or want to control society would like to make the power in our lives. But for the rest of the time, they are dealing with their families, their husbands who might be constantly being fed on WhatsApp University, or their wives who are listening to gossip. Social change is a very slow phenomenon. And I think we've just had our 75th anniversary Students' Annual Day. And for this time's annual day, I borrowed or took a book which is called She's a Girl. It's by a woman called Aparna Jain. And there are two books, Boys Will Be Boys and She's a Girl. And they talk about people of our generation who are icons and who people don't know about because the media doesn't report them. So the book on girls, for instance, has Gauri Lankesh, it has Indira Jaising, it has Tista Setalwad, it has Leela Sheth, it has Bhamri Devi, it has the women who are fighting the Bhopal gas tragedy 40 years after. So we took 6 of those women and we created dance pieces to them. And we asked our 200 children to research into these women. And there were 7 and 8-year-olds on their parents' phones trying to Google these women and find out in different languages. And it was an extraordinary performance. And I would like to think that 200 children and their parents now have current day icons that their children can aspire to. So every incremental step it's a David and Goliath fight, really. Because all the powers that be, that have all the money, that have all the armies, that sell all the arms, that are destroying Gaza, want it
Right.
otherwise.
Yeah.
So with the aid of technology, a lot of the villainy gets mutated into something much worse. Whether it's pornography, or it is the lynching of Muslims in India, or it is houses being bulldozed in Kashmir over the last 3 days, you see it in very graphic, very intimate contact. And that's hard to fight, but we will fight it, and we will hopefully change people day by day and person by person. And maybe incrementally it might not come to a huge amount, but even if one can change maybe 100 families so that there are no dowries in those 100 families, maybe that 100 will multiply into 1,000. Maybe
Right.
there will be girls here who grow up and say, I will not get into the marriage market because I've spent 7 years at Darpana and they've taught us something different. Maybe.
To change,
That's the
yeah, to change gears a bit, I believe some 35,000 practitioners of various classical dance forms from across
I
India and
won't
the world.
I wouldn't call them practitioners. We've had over 35,000 students who have
Okay.
all been through rigorous training. Perhaps not even 1% are practitioners, but they all carry something deep and philosophical and resonant inside them. And I constantly meet people in strange spaces. I'm dancing in Lubbock, Texas, and somebody comes up to me and says, Mallika, you don't know me, but I was your senior at Darpana. I have never danced since then, but please tell Mrinalini Ben that those 7 years have given me the character to be able to face any crisis in my life. And I think that is more important than me turning out race horses as dancers. It's much more important for me that people become stronger, more grounded, and more humane because of what they did for the 7 years here.
So these are not people who necessarily pursue dance as a career. They just
Not at all.
it's a way of life for them.
Yeah.
Uh,
They probably came because their mothers wanted to learn and never could, never had the opportunity. But Mayank, 7 years is a significant time that they spend with us,
it is,
even if
yeah.
it's just 3 hours in a week. We try and weave in value education, democracy. What does it mean to be a citizen? What does it mean to be an egalitarian person, demanding equality, demanding justice? All this through allegedly teaching them Bharatanatyam. But
Tell me a bit more about that because I mean I'm interested to know for the sake of my viewers what it is that a student who comes to Darpana and commits for 7 years is exposed to in terms of daily routines.
well, they come and we have a very, very worked out syllabus. So there's the first 2 years, then there's the next 3 years, and then there's the next 2 years. And that goes through a particular Bharatanatyam syllabus, which is called the Margam. The Margam is a path and starts with just footwork, then add foot and hand, but no meaning. And then in the fourth year, you come into lyrics, which means you come into abhinaya, expression, and you start to have to use the face, not only the body. And it's incrementally, I mean, it's handed down 200 years, but it's an extremely well thought of curriculum of how a child, as she grows up, so by the time she's 13 or 14, she probably has had the first pangs of love. She probably has had the first pangs of attraction. So when the heroine says, I long for you, she's beginning to understand what that means. Nowhere near, but she's beginning. She at
Right.
least knows of a pang she felt when she saw somebody. And it's the physical body that gets trained first before the mind and the soul start getting involved. So they spend 7 years. We expose them to this. We expose them also at Natrani to a lot of world dancing.
I see.
Young dancers, different styles, what people are doing with dance, how you can use dance for communications, how people are emerging with using dance theater, dance puppetry, all of that. So their entire horizon of the arts is very, very wide, because we have close to 50 performances every year, of which they see at least 6 or 8. And then in class, we discuss it. How do you see the difference between Odissi and Bharatanatyam? Where do you think Odissi comes from? What were the influences that made it what it was? So that understanding of philosophy and religion gets different. When
Right.
Krishna takes away the Gopika's clothes, is it because he's a dirty warrior, or is there something else? What does it mean? What do these myths mean in today's terms? What do these right and wrong things mean when you are facing corruption every day? So My teachers are trained to bring current affairs and value education into it because schools don't give it and parents don't give it. The question of right and wrong, of ethics, is not part of today's conversation. So
Right.
when we say, do you think that this is right? So one of the women in the annual day event was a woman who fought superstition. Uh, she fought she fought the fact that innocent women were made into witches when a witch doctor failed, and she fought it all her life. Uh, and at the end of that sequence, our 7-year-olds turned to the audience and said, "Do you believe that a woman who is menstruating shouldn't come into your house? Ask yourself. Do you believe that a widow shouldn't come to a wedding? Ask yourself." So, 7-year-old children asking this to parents actually makes them stop and think. And the children know what they're talking about because we've discussed, they have researched it. What is menstruation? Why is it not dirty? Why is it part of natural living? And so on and so forth. So a lot of these taboos and so on that so many educated and rich people and middle class people practice get confronted through the mouths of babes.
Right. At what age do your students normally join?
7.
7. That's really early, right?
Well, Bharatanatyam is hard on the legs, and Amma always felt that children would become bow-legged if she started earlier. So,
Right.
if, for instance, a 6-year-old comes who is big built, then we will take her in. So, it's not so much age as size
Okay.
and strength.
How frequent is it that a student or students after 7 years may not necessarily become great or even good dancers, but become better human beings?
I would like to think at least 80%
I see.
become
That's
better
interesting.
human beings,
Yeah.
or at least
A
more
question
humane human beings.
that a question that occurred to me this morning while I was writing up a few. It do you think, given the serious mission of Darpana, your shows may often end up being somewhat teaching heavy or sermon heavy at the cost of the inherent joy of dancing? Do you
No, no,
get
no,
that
I
sense?
don't. No, I don't, because one of the things that we learned from Amma's choreography is that it had to be entertaining. You had to keep bums on seats. It could not
Indeed.
become agit-prop. And one of the horrible things that NGOs have done is that they have taken music and theater and completely ruined them. And so
Absolutely.
people think theater is bad. No, we are professionally trained dancers, actors, filmmakers who continuously have to keep our audiences in their seats. Our
Right.
audiences. We are performing across the world all the time. So the balance, it still has to be amusing and entertaining and fun and whatever, even if it makes you sad. And even if you disagree with my point of view, you still want to sit there and watch it because it is watchable, because it is something that is electrifying.
Who designs? Do you personally get involved in designing or upgrading your curriculum from time to time?
Yeah, very much so.
Tell me about that, because I'm very curious about a process like that. Do you sit down with your fellow teachers and say these are the changing times and this is what, say
So,
for
for
instance,
instance,
yeah,
during COVID, with my artistic director Yadavan, we created a set of 100 videos
I see,
where each foot movement and hand movement was videoed as you would never see it in a teaching process if you were face to face,
I see,
because it was at an angle which you never see. You're always looking down at the foot.
right.
But here you were looking at the foot, so that if the foot was doing this, or if this heel was going up, you were looking at it from here, and from here.
That's fascinating.
And we gave these 100 videos. And in the summer, the children are supposed to be looking at their class specific videos
Mhm.
and correcting their own things. And this is how we use technology, for instance.
Right, right.
In our assessments, which are every 3 months, we video the children and we call in the parents and the child and we show them the video and we tell them what is working and what is not working and why we are giving a certain grade, because we can actually show it to them.
Right.
So, and curriculum wise, the basic curriculum doesn't change, but the way it is packaged changes.
Are you the only sort of school of its kind? Because I don't know if something like this exists elsewhere in India. Something which is so elaborate and so thought through.
I think we are probably the only institution where the teaching wing is geared to the here and now and the hurly-burly of the world around us, rather than teach in this Guru Shishya Parampara, something I don't think is relevant today. For me to live in a bubble is not a luxury that I think any of us can take. And if my 7 or 8-year-old is going to have a bad touch in the rickshaw in which she goes to school, I need to have prepared her for that.
Right.
A normal Kathak or Bharatanatyam training will not prepare her for that. But I think intersectionality is a word that's used all the time. I think dance has to be a part of life, and life has to be a part of dance.
Right.
Or music or whatever.
Mrinalini Ben saw a lot of the evolution of Darpana, unlike Vikram Bhai. My question is, how would Vikram Bhai look at, if he were alive today, at what
Papa
Darpana
would be thrilled. Papa would be thrilled at what I'm doing. Amma and Papa, Kartike, my brother and I often tease each other and say, ostensibly, I became an artist and he became an environmentalist.
Right.
And ostensibly, Papa was a scientist and Amma was a dancer. But we are all working towards human development and the development of India.
Indeed.
We've taken different routes, but what are we really doing? What is Kartikeya doing? He's trying to improve the life of the last Indian through talking about environmental issues and climate change and water and so on. And that's really what we are trying to do at Darpana as well, is to empower people to lead better lives, to lead lives where they demand justice, where they demand rights of a citizen, and when they demand dignity.
What vision do you have for the, say, next 50 years of Darpana?
My dear Mayank, are we going to be around in 50 years? We might all apocalyptically die.
I think somebody will carry on, right?
I think just coping with the changing world today, yes, one has a vision, but I think just coping with the scurrilous world that we live in, that dismembers every day, every single day. You pick up the news and something more has gone.
Right.
Something more of what we consider humanity, of what we consider civilization, has been dismantled. And to keep an integrity and a core within that is already a lot to ask for.
Right.
So yes, I would like to see that Darpana continues creating work that is, in some senses, a mirror to society, so that society may think differently of issues that it otherwise gets brainwashed about. I would like to think that Darpana will continue teaching life rather than dance, teaching life through the arts, and that we will be able to be a tiny, tiny, tiny part in making a difference to humanity.
To conclude, the offering as part of your 75th anniversary is, you sent me the material, Meanwhile Elsewhere, by Yadav and Chandran. It is described as an experience that shifts between dream and memory. Tell me a bit about that.
There is a book by Italo Calvino that has been a favorite of mine for many, many years. It's called Invisible Cities, and it is a conversation, an imagined conversation between Kublai Khan, who was taking over the world, and Marco Polo, who was the person who traveled the world and brought back news to Kublai Khan. Kublai Khan is so established, he's never moved. He doesn't know what his conquered territories are. And Marco Polo is the kinetic energy, it's the Shiva and the Shakti.
Right.
Shiva without Shakti is Shava, a dead body. So
Yes.
Kublai without Marco Polo, bringing in that energy, bringing in the descriptions of invisible cities. But it is really a relationship between two people, a relationship of imagination, a relationship of memory, of nostalgia, of things you have never seen, of things that you are never able to articulate till you see something.
Right.
And I think Yadavan has managed to do that, and we've now had 12 performances, and we have had the most extraordinary responses from all sorts of people. I mean, we had a conference of climate change and climate change action here, and all of them came to see it. And amongst the audience was the head of the United Nations Climate Change Program and UNESCO's head of climate change and the chief builder of Amsterdam City. And they were in tears. They said, everything we have been speaking about, we see in your performance in a way that touches our heart and our mind and our soul more than any amount of our lecturing or teaching can do. It's just become a phenomena, and I'm very much hoping to bring it to America. So we are already in conversations with people. It's a complex project. We are first taking it around India, and maybe in a year and a half or 2 years, bring it to America.
Look forward to that. Well, on that note, Mallika Ben, I want to thank you for your time. It's always riveting to talk to you, but it was a great pleasure to do that. And again, congratulations on the 75th anniversary.
Thank you.
Thank you.